Isn't it strange how paradoxical your world feels? Learning something new makes you feel dumb before it makes you wise. Working out makes you feel weak before it makes you strong. Facing your fears makes you feel terrified before it makes you brave. In order to heal, you have to suffer. And in order to have peace, you need chaos. Because life disguises growth as failure and progress as pain. But if it feels hard, it probably matters. Because becoming is messy. It breaks who you were to make room for who you're meant to be. You don't build strength by feeling powerful. You build it by showing up when you feel powerless. So if you feel tired, uncertain, and behind, you might just be in the middle of becoming. And that's exactly where you're supposed to be.
Shalom. First, I'd like to begin by giving all praises to H.O.B, double honors to the apostles of great soul and rule well. Alright, and I want to do a quick video over this video here. Start with the book of Romans chapter 8 and verse 16. It says the Spirit, Romans 8 and verse 18. It says, for I reckon that the suffering of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. The keyword is the suffering, right? The suffering of this present time, and as the video just see, learning something new will make you feel stupid, right? You'll gain wisdom, right? Exercising will make you feel weak in order for you to be strong, right? And the process that we are going through right now is a trying process. It's hard. Really and truly, it hard. The suffering that some might go through worse than others. There's some brothers who are working, the majority of them are working hand to mouth. You know what I mean? Cost of living going up, the rich getting richer and the poor staying on a certain level because that is where they want it to be, right? Especially when you're actually coming to the knowledge of this truth. You understand why these things happening, right? Because we are the Lord's chosen. So you will even suffer more. You will even suffer more in this truth. Where the scripture clearly shows you that suffering is a part of this. Yahushua went on the cross, Yahushua suffered. Right? In order for Yahushua, and the kingdom was given unto him. Right? But he had was to go through the process of stripes. Joseph had was to go through being sold into captivity. Let's see if I can get a scripture real quick here. Right? So this is the book of Genesis 37. Just to get straight to the point, I will start from verse 16. It says, verse 15. It says, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flock. And the man said, they are departed hence. For I heard them saying, let us go to Dodan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dodan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. So this is something what Joseph had was to go through. Alright, the majority of the men in the scriptures, mighty men in the scriptures, men of renown, they had was to go through a certain ordeal in order for them to inherit goodness, in order for them to inherit royalty, whatever the case might be. Alright? So you see they conspired against him to slay him, verse 19. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, some evil beast had devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. You know, and on another hand too, the scripture remind me of in the curses Deuteronomy 28. You know, your eye shall be evil towards thy brother. Because even back then, that before Moses receiving the law, you know, the eye was evil towards their brother. So that is just to show that the law was always there. You know, these things was always there from the beginning, right after when Adam went off. You know, because the scripture clearly tells you the Lord gave us 3 commandments whereby, you know, we must abide roughly pathways in. Let's see if I can get that, not to go off topic. So Acts 7, and verse 21, it says, For God had given strict commandments to such as came, what they should do to live, even as they came, and what they should observe to avoid punishment. Right? So even from back then, the Lord gave us them strict commandments on what we should do, right? To avoid punishment, to avoid death. Right, moving on, back in Genesis 37, it says 37:21, and Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into the pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hands upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Galilee, and they, with their camels, bearing spices and blams and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then they passed by the Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. They brought Joseph into Egypt, and Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brother and said, The child is not, and whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goat, and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or not. And he knew it, and said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast had devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son's mourning. Thus his father wept for him, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt, into Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. Now I read this basically because we all know the story of Joseph. When he went in, he was sold by his brothers to the Midianites. Midianites sold him into Egypt, to the Egyptians, and so you read about that story, you go understand what Joseph went through. He went through a whole ordeal. Now this is the book of Acts 14 and 22. It says, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of Yahweh. Right? So it's a process, right? It's a process. Sirach, right? Sirach. Sirach 2. It says, my child, when you come to serve Yahweh, prepare your soul for testing. Set your heart right and be steadfast, and do not be impetuous in the time of calamity. Cling to him and do not depart, so that your last days may be prosperous. Cling to him and do not depart, so that your last days may be prosperous. Accept whatever befalls you, and in times of humiliation be patient, for gold is tested in the fire, and those found acceptable in the furnace of humiliation. I'll read that over. It says, for gold is tested in the fire, and those found acceptable in the furnace of humiliation. Trust in him, and he will help you make your way straight, and hope in him. You who fear Yahweh, wait for his mercy. Do not stray, or else you may fall. You who fear Yahweh, trust in him, and your reward will not be lost. You who fear Yahweh, hope for good things, for lasting joy and mercy. Consider the generation of old, and see as anyone trusted in Yahweh, and been disappointed? Has anyone preserved in the fear of Yahweh and has been forsaken? Or has anyone called upon him and been neglected? For Yahweh is compassionate and merciful. He forgiveth sin and saves in time of distress. Understand? And I could go on, but I will stay right there. So you have to trust in Yahweh, Bashim Yashai. This thing is about learning to suffer. This truth is about learning to suffer. Some might disagree with what I'm saying, but suffering is a main part of this truth, babe. Suffering is a main part of this truth. And the Lord will let us suffer forever, but the suffering part is the testing part. We all been through it. And
the main part coming, which is that day of the RFID microchip, that day of Jacob's trouble, that day of World War III, because that day will be a terrible day, but that day will be a day of deliverance. Only if you trust in the name of Yahweh Hashem Yashai, you will be delivered. Only if you have faith in Yahweh Hashem Yashai, you will be delivered. So with that, I hope this video is edifying. Give our praises to Yahweh Hashem Yashai. Double honors to the apostles who ruled on a great millstone. Salutation and blessing to the true and sincere accomplishing soul and sincerity and truth to you sisters who listen in humility. Shalom.